On the worst day of my life, what was going on through my mind was everything but what happened, I guess. I was looking forward to the hunting, to the trip, I guess, and you know, didn't make it there. As a result of the accident, I still, you know, incur back pain every day. You know, it's normally when I slow down at night is when I feel it. I know that my, you know, injuries will affect me earlier than, you know, someone that didn't have them. My advice to someone that's, you know, going through what I went through would be just always try and stay positive. It's tough, but, you know, stay positive and just do your best, and it'll all work out. It'll, you know, what's meant to be will happen.
Today, the Insider Exclusive goes behind the headlines in American Crystal Sugar Company Beet Harvest Road Peril to meet with Steve Gabrielson at the Stephen Gabrielson Limited Law Firm, who successfully represented Dan Rassat when he was seriously injured during the pre-dawn hours of October 17, 2007. Dan Rassat and a group of friends were driving through North Dakota on a duck hunting trip just east of Cavalier, North Dakota on westbound North Dakota State Highway 5 when they ran into the back of a semi hauling a water tanker. The collision occurred near the entrance to the ACS Hamilton Beet Piling Station. The highway adjacent to the entrance to the piling station was completely covered with inches of slippery, wet mud. The back of the semi was so obliterated with mud that its taillights and reflectors were invisible. The semi had just left the beet piling station, and the driver, because of the muddy conditions, was having trouble getting his semi up to speed. When the driver of the pickup truck applied his brakes, the mud on the road made his efforts hopeless, and the pickup slid into the back of the semi. Dan sustained serious injuries, including multiple tears of his small and large intestines and a fractured L3 vertebrae. He was rushed to the hospital in Fargo, North Dakota for immediate surgery. Several companies were named as responsible parties for causing Dan's serious injuries, but the biggest challenge was to prove that American Crystal Sugar, the largest sugar producer in the world, had created the dangerous and muddy conditions on the roadway adjacent to the beet piling station. The North Dakota Beet Harvest campaign typically runs from early September to late October. Beets are harvested and emptied into trucks in the field. The trucks transport the beets over the public highways to various ACS beet piling stations. After the harvest campaign, the beets are hauled to an ACS processing plant where they are refined into sugar. North Dakota law assigns authority and responsibility for the construction, maintenance, protection, and control of the highways to the North Dakota Department of Transportation. A landowner, in the absence of a statute to the contrary, owes no duty to the public to keep the highway adjacent to his property in a safe condition. But North Dakota law, however, does subject a landowner to liability if the landowner affirmatively creates or contributes to an artificial condition on an adjacent highway that involves an unreasonable risk to others. Steve Gabrielson's law firm developed a very successful legal strategy to show that ACS contributed to the hazardous highway conditions and was aware of them, and settled the case successfully right before trial. Throughout his career, Steve Gabrielson has earned a reputation as an unyielding advocate and lawyer who repeatedly represents individual men, women, and families in search of the truth in the name of justice. And he repeatedly wins. Steve has earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best trial lawyers in Sartell, in Minnesota, and across the nation. The Insider Exclusive News team discovered that no other attorney in the St. Cloud-Brainerd area has tried as many cases for injury victims as he has in the past 20 years. And Steve's experience has allowed him to earn both state and national certification as a civil trial specialist, an award granted to less than 1% of Minnesota attorneys. He's tried cases in more than 20 Minnesota counties and has won large settlements for clients throughout Minnesota and other states, and has built a substantial reputation nationwide by consistently winning cases other law firms have turned down. Steve's spirit and dedication is often compared to President Teddy Roosevelt, especially when it comes to being in the courtroom, in the arena he knows so well. For as Steve often says, it is not the critic who counts, nor the man who points out how the strong man stumbled, or where the doer of deeds could have done it better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and spends himself in a worthy cause, daring greatly so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. Steve's amazing courtroom skills and headline-grabbing success rate continue to provide his clients with the results they need and the results they deserve. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Sartell, Minnesota. It is my great pleasure to introduce Steve Gabrielson to the show. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thank you.
Tell our audience a little bit about your firm. What kind of law do you practice?
I'm a personal injury lawyer. My law firm is located in Sartell, Minnesota, which is a suburb of St. Cloud. I have a branch office up in Brainerd, Minnesota, which is about a mile, or I should say about an hour north of St. Cloud.
Mm-hmm. Now, you are a certified civil trial specialist, right?
That's right.
And I believe only 1% of trial lawyers attain that kind of rating. What does that mean, and why is it important?
Well, I actually have two civil trial certifications. One is a state certification that's granted by the Minnesota State Bar Association. The other is a certification that's national. It's granted by the National Board of Trial Advocacy. I think the statistic is that less than 1% of Minnesota attorneys have both national and state certification. Approximately 3% of Minnesota attorneys have state certification.
Right.
The important characteristic about certification is that there is a guarantee that the attorney that you're working with has sufficient experience both in pretrial matters and in actual trials conducted, so that you can count on having an attorney who is experienced. Another thing about it would be that we go through a rigorous testing process. You can't just say, I've had 20 trials, therefore I'm entitled to be certified. Instead, there is a multi-day testing program. You have to do well on that test, and then you have to recertify every set number of years.
Really?
Yes, and finally you have to be recommended by judges.
I read someplace you have tried more cases than any other trial lawyer in the area. Is that right?
In this part of the state, I think that's true. I've been maintaining that in my marketing for quite a number of years. No one's ever challenged it, and I don't think there would be a good reason to do so. But at least in the last 20 years around this part of central Minnesota, I believe I've tried more cases for injured persons than any other lawyer.
Mm-hmm. One of the cases you've tried is the case with Dan Rassat.
That's right.
Tell our audience who Dan is.
Now, Dan actually had a case that was about a month or two away from trial before a series of favorable rulings by the district court in Pembina County, North Dakota, caused our primary defendant to want to settle the case. But that was headed for trial, and it had been in litigation for a number of years. Now, Dan was a young man who came to me following a very serious motor vehicle accident in North Dakota. Dan and a group of his friends were on their way to go on a duck hunting trip. It was in the pre-dawn hours. They were heading west across North Dakota on Highway 5, northern part of the state, and the truck that Dan was riding in struck the back of a water tanker truck. It's a semi that was hauling a tanker of water.
Right.
You know, huge truck.
And as you're talking, we're showing photographs of this.
Right. The back of the truck was obliterated with mud, which made it impossible to see in the headlights of the pickup. But when the truck driver did notice this wall of blackness that was darker than the darkness around him, he realized right away that it was a truck, hit the brakes, but to no avail, because the area where the collision occurred happened to be in the vicinity of a beet piling station.
Right, belonging to American Crystal.
American Crystal Sugar Corporation,
Yes.
That's right. That's an agricultural cooperative that is run by about, I think, 3,000 farmer producers in the Red River Valley of Minnesota and North Dakota.
He suffered serious injuries.
He did.
Tell our audience a little bit about these injuries, because you have excellent diagrams and photographs which we're showing.
Very good. Dan was a middle backseat passenger in the truck. The force of the impact was such that he was scissored forward. He broke the L3 vertebrae in his spine, and perhaps more significantly, he literally tore his intestines apart. He had to be transported for immediate surgery, life-saving surgery that day. His omentum, the protective sheath in his abdomen, was removed. He had several portions of his small intestines and his large intestine that were damaged so badly that surgery needed to be performed to reconnect them. And with respect to his colon, he had to go through a temporary colostomy as a result of his injuries.
Now,
fortunately, there was a reverse colostomy performed later on.
Now, this case had a lot of challenges when you pursued it.
It did.
What was the biggest challenge, and how did you overcome that?
Well, as I looked at the case, it was clear to me that the easy case, the direct case, if you will, was against the trucking company and the truck driver that had the semi.
Yes.
The truck was of sufficient size and weight so that it was governed by state law and federal motor carrier safety regulations that wouldn't approve of having the back of the truck so obliterated that reflectors and lights wouldn't be visible.
Yeah.
On one of the photographs you may see, you'll see actually a spot where a portion of the tail light is visible. That's because somebody from the trucking company came by and wiped that clean as the state trooper was taking photographs, and he made special note of that, emphasizing, if you will, how badly covered with mud the truck was. That was the easy case. To me, the more compelling case was the case against American Crystal. And the reason I thought that case was compelling was because the road, as you'll see in the photographs, was completely covered by inches of sticky, wet mud.
That comes off the field.
Well, yes.
The real challenge here, obviously, American Crystal Sugar, the truck that came off its field, had caused all of this mud and all this, you know, terrible terrain that he could drive his truck over.
You get right to it, but that's not quite right.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. There are about 3,000 farmer producers in the Red River Valley for American Crystal. It's the largest producer of sugar in the United States.
Yes.
And I couldn't bring claims against 3,000 producers because how are we going to tell where the mud is coming from? What I actually found to be a real turning point for us in this case was testimony from people who had their feet on the ground at these piling stations.
Yeah.
Those people testified that most of the mud that was on the road near the entrance to the piling station was not coming from the fields. It was coming from the piling station itself.
Right.
A piling station owned and operated by American Crystal Sugar, staffed by temporary employees during the beet harvest season.
Now, when you sued American Crystal Sugar, what did they use as their defense, the North Dakota law?
They asserted that under North Dakota law, they had absolutely no duty with respect to the highway adjacent to their piling station. By the way, they have piling stations all over northeastern North Dakota and northwestern Minnesota during the harvest campaign. And the beets are piled there temporarily, then after the harvest campaign, they're moved to the 5 processing plants that American Crystal has throughout Minnesota and North Dakota.
Right. There are some exceptions to that law, right?
Yeah, well, the primary law is that in North Dakota, all of the responsibility for construction and maintenance of the roads is given to the North Dakota Department of Transportation. Furthermore, people that own property that is adjacent to a highway have no duty, absent a statute to the contrary, to do anything with respect to the safety or condition of the highway adjacent to their property. The exception, and the one we relied on, that was picked up very well by the district court in Pembina County, was the situation that exists if a landowner adjacent to the highway affirmatively causes the muddy condition. That's what we tried to demonstrate in this case, that American Crystal had hired temporary employees, some with literally no experience in this sort of work, that were responsible for keeping that piling station free of mud. They couldn't do it, and the trucks were literally pulling mud out of the piling station onto the road in front of it. And again, as you see from the photographs, it was a quagmire out there.
Right, because of that exception, because you were able to prove that and that successful ruling in the district court.
That's right.
You settled the case successfully, right?
Just prior to trial.
Okay. Today we are fortunate enough to have your client, Dan Rassat, here. So let's bring him on right now.
Great.
It is my great pleasure to introduce Dan Rassat to the show. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming here.
No problem.
Boy, when I read your case, some horrible injuries. Tell our audience what you remember just before the crash, that early morning when you were out there with your friends.
Yeah, right before the crash, you know, we're on our way traveling in early morning. It had been just getting light. It was cloudy, kind of a little bit foggy. I guess right before the crash, I just remember having a conversation with the driver, kind of looking out. I was in the middle, back passenger, and just looking out, just kind of seeing a dark haze, something darker, you know, and just kind of both looked like, what is that? And, you know, that's when we realized what it was. It was too late.
Now you suffered some severe injuries. It has been how many years since that accident?
5 years, roughly.
How are you today?
I still struggle. I guess first thing I said, I'm very happy how I am right now. But I do struggle with a few things relating back to the accident.
How has your life changed as a result of some of the injuries that you suffered?
You know, I just got put. A whole year of my life is pretty much, going backwards, and then trying to fight forward again. Just healing from injuries for about a whole year. It has changed my life. Just I would like to have done some stuff sooner. Just stuff I put on hold. I mean, just college in general. I went to 2 years when I had planned on going a year. Lots of things.
You're on national TV right now, and one of the reasons we do these shows is because oftentimes major corporations and people who eventually are held responsible for other people's injuries, fight off that responsibility. What would you say to American Crystal Sugar today, now that you're on national TV?
I just like to, when you're putting public safety at risk, I think they should, have the responsibility to take care of the roads and look out for. I realize, it's a timing thing with the sugar beet harvest and stuff, but when you're putting, innocent people's life at risk, they should maintain the roads better than they do.
How do you think Steve handled your case?
Very good. I'm very, very pleased with, the law firm, him and his, great staff, great people to work with. Really felt like he, cared, and, this trial was a long, drawn-out, affair, and got to know Steve pretty well, and really appreciate all you've done for me, and yeah, I'm very, very satisfied.
Well, I want to thank you very much for taking your time to be with us on this show. Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve, how do you evaluate taking on any case?
I take a look at several factors, but of course the main things you look at would be, is there liability? Has somebody done something so that legal responsibility should attach? And then of course you look at the damages that your potential client has sustained.
Right.
Dan Rassat sustained horrendous injuries.
And one thing I noticed about this particular case, there was a big challenge here, to the North Dakota law. And that set a standard that was high to reach. And you had a major Fortune 500 company on the other side with an army of lawyers.
That's right.
That probably gave you a tough time, right?
They did. It was a case that involved a huge motion practice. We struggled to get information from American Crystal. I think we ended up taking over 20 depositions
Wow.
in the case.
We did a fantastic job, and I want to thank you for being on our program today.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.